Hi investigators and security risk managers, Mike Evans again with the second in our series of security risk management for compliance with the Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division CPP 30619 live learning 24 hours face-to-face instruction. This is part 2 of the risk assessment unit, which affects 7 in particular qualifications that we have at the Australian Security Academy that it is relevant to, as well as 14 units of competency. So we're not looking at the whole process yesterday or today, we're looking at one part of that process today. And that one part is identifying risks. And what we have to take away from today at the end of this program is that we can select methods for identifying risks in accordance with risk management policy and procedures, budgetary and time constraints relative to this type of activity to be undertaken. Now, this could be for a small business, it could be for a government department, it could be for a whole of state government, it could be a whole of federal government, it could be for a big corporation that is a global top 100 corporation. Doesn't matter the scale, these techniques apply regardless of the scale. You're going to be able to identify and document sources of risks as required, identify and record risk events related to each source of risk, and undertake consultation to ensure all possible risks have been identified. So that's part 2 of what we are going to cover today. We looked at the context yesterday. Now, the context, again, that could have been for a small business, it could have been for an investigation agency, a security firm, it could have been for Centrelink, it could have been for a nuclear power plant, it could be for the NRL Grand Final. It doesn't matter. The application of the security risk management process is the same regardless of the size. It might even be for the Olympic Games. So today we're looking at the process of identifying risks. It's not commonly known, but the number one risk in every individual case for every security risk assessment you do, even if it's in the middle of Antarctica, which is where it'd probably be worse, is fire. If your business structure or where you store your business records is destroyed by fire, there's a good chance you're going to lose absolutely everything. Those records aren't backed up in another location or on another hard drive or server somewhere else, you could lose everything. And it's pretty common in insurance matters where cases where a structure is destroyed completely by fire and it's a business, that business, because of the lack of access to past customer records, financial records, that sort of thing, becomes insolvent a few months later, regardless of the insurance they had to rebuild the structure. So keep that in mind for everybody. A home resident, a worker in a workplace, that may be a factory, it may be a farm outdoors. It could be a CBD building. The number one risk to us all is fire. So that's an incredible revelation for some people. As an ex-fireman, volunteer fireman, I'm very well aware of the risk of fire. Now, of course, recently, I think there was a small earthquake in Victoria, and we had a disastrous earthquake in New South Wales some 20 years ago or so. So that's also a realistic risk that can happen where we live in Southeast Asia, in Australia. So methods of identifying risks. There are two methods. Firstly, there's internal and there is external methods. So the internal methods of identifying risks include looking at the records of previous activities. So what has happened that has negatively impacted the organisation, the business, the location, or the event in the past? So we look at records of that. Now, the records we may obtain could be security reports. They could be financial reports. They could be customer complaints. They might be government compliance, adherence, action taken against you. So they are some of the records that you could look at. There might also be annual reports of the business, its profitability or its losses, that sort of thing. So they are records that we can study to see. We might look at staff leave records relating to health. We might look at records such as hours lost to injury, like they do in mining or construction. We might look at records of people's absences from the workplace, and they might tell us various things. For example, in summer, people may have been affected negatively by the hot weather or something like that. The next method that's internal that we use is penetration testing. Now, never in history has penetration testing become so more important than in the environment we live with our online security. So we are constantly, just as citizens wandering around, bombarded with text saying, we have missed your delivery, please go to this link and put in your details. And they're people fishing for your bank records or for your phone records to get into other things, that sort of thing. So they are constantly doing that. So online security is vital, and all organisations, as part of their risk identification process today, must carry out penetration testing to see if what they're paying for actually works. Now, there's an old story that one of the presidents of the United States was sat down in the Oval Office, and he was told that if a nuclear threat happens, that he'll be evacuated to safety within 15 minutes. He said, okay, go. And his Central Intelligence Agency advisors, who just told him that, gave him a filthy look, and they really didn't know what to do. And some 7.5 hours later, he was taken and put in a secure location. Now, it wasn't within the 15 minutes that he was told. He wanted to know if what he was told would work. You're a small business. You want to know if what you are told will work. Is a customer going to pay you within your payment terms, that sort of thing. So you don't just identify the risks, you do testing against your risk countermeasures. So penetration testing is one way to see if those countermeasures themselves are a risk. You may examine the results of personal, local, or overseas experience. So if you've been put in charge of the Olympic Games in Australia, in Brisbane, in 2032 or whenever it is, you might want to go back and have a look at the Berlin Olympics, the Los Angeles Olympics, the Moscow Olympics, the Beijing Olympics, and look at what they did at those turbulent times, which are no less turbulent, I would imagine, in 2032. May we all be there to see it. So you can compare the overseas experience of people involved in that, identifying risks there, with what you've got coming up. Now, of course, the landscape will change. There'll be another upset organisation here, and there'll be another issue there, whatever. But a lot of it, from the results of the past and personal experience overseas, can be looked at and compared. You may arrange interviews and discussions with stakeholders. Now, there's no more knowledgeable person on planet Earth than the person who's working at the coalface where the risks may occur. Now, if we look at an experience that we've all had at some stage in our lives, usually in our late teens to early 20s, we've all tried to get into nightclubs. And we've rocked up at the nightclub, tried to act like we're really, really sober, got up to the guy on the door, and this 10-foot tall gorilla looks you up and down to make sure you're dressed appropriately for this nightclub, that you're not intoxicated, and then he or she would let you into the nightclub. Now, 97% of the nightclub's security issues were solved by rejecting people who weren't dressed appropriately. They rocked up in their shorts, longs and singlets with tattoos on their face, and they were drunk, and security rejected them at the door. They didn't get in. So that's where 95% of the issues were solved at that point, at the coalface. So it's just an example. Now, it could be you need to consult with your staff in a retail situation about a change in payment systems from the old credit card or the old cash to new systems where people use their phone or something like that. You may have to consult with them in relation to that. So you can distribute surveys and questionnaires to stakeholders and conduct interviews with them. You can conduct audits and physical inspections. Now, during the audit process and the physical inspection process, you can make checks and validations on what you've been told. It could be the number of visitors, the time of day that it's the busiest in that function at that workplace or that warehouse or on that farm or whatever. So you don't just look at this, oh, I'll get on the internet, have a look at their website and look at their webcam and see what the factory looks like inside. No, you go there and you walk through and experience that the forklifts are being driven correctly. They're being operated by licensed, trained people, and that the workplace health and safety system is available to everybody to go and read whenever they want, and they can make complaints or whatever it is you're looking at, and they know how to do it. So you've got to check that these things that you're told functioning, that they really are functioning. You can go and directly observe the activity. Now, audits, inspections, penetration tests, and observations are very important because people will not do what you expect. They won't. You can expect them to do anything, they're not going to do it. They're going to do it their way and get it done. But they will do what you inspect. So if they see you actually inspecting the workplace health and safety of the operation, the security of the operation, and let's say it's a New South Wales Rugby League club, and you want to conduct a penetration test. So they're not allowed to open, I'm making this up as I go along, until 10:30 a.m. in the morning. And you look like me, a desperate pensioner pokey player, and you rock up and knock on the door at 9:15, and it'll get a couple of staff's attention. And through the locked door, you explain to them, you've got to go to the doctor's, pension day, you need to put your pension in the pokies really quickly. You're on it last night until 11:30, and you think it's going to win, and you give them a big sob story and see if they let you in. Now, this is before security are there, and it's while the CCTV's all shut down and being cleaned, and you could be an armed robber going in to rob that place. So you're making sure through this process of internal risk identification, through your inspections, that the people who are in charge with carrying out the security risk process are actually implementing it as you expect, because you're inspecting. And they've got to be put on notice that you are inspecting. They're the internal methods. Now, to go to the external methods of risk identification, you can employ professional consultants. These are endless. I was doing some research this morning, And one of the people I ended up doing some research on was a person who live streams gourmet supermarket food. And he's got 75,000 people that watch his live stream. It's a really niche area, and I guess there are people out there that are interested in gourmet baked beans rather than 75-cent Heinz baked beans. I don't know. But he would be a consultant for people doing research into that kind of work because of the numbers of followers he has, the content he puts up, that sort of thing in relation to marketing to people interested in gourmet food. And I looked at it, and he was talking about the top 100 cookies and the top 100 chocolate chip cookies and the top 100 home-baked cookies. And he just has raving fans for this type of stuff that he puts out. So there is a consultant on just about anything. Now, it could be about musical events. There are consultants for that, putting them together. There are wedding planners who put weddings together. So there are security firms that specialise in wedding security. There are accountants that you can consult with about financial risks. And there are workplace health and safety authorities out there in relation to just about anything. Now, I do the assessment for training and assessment for a lot of people who are involved in workplace health and safety. And they bring to the table some amazing experience, and they're employed in workplaces and government departments because they specialise in chemicals or they specialise in explosives. I mean, they got a double degree in construction and building, but they like blowing things up. So they're demolition experts. So they can be consulted in relation to removal of a building in an inner city block that has to be removed, demolished without doing damage to the other buildings next to it or something like that. So there are consultants out there for just about anything you want in the times we live in today. And it's competitive, all right, they're affordable. And again, just like you're checking of the systems to see if they work before you engage consultants, speak to people who have used those consultants and find out about their experience with them. So you're ensuring, once again, that your risk identification process, you are following your own talk, you're walking your own talk in that respect. You can consult with associated professional organisations. So there's the Hoteliers Association, there are investigation associations, there are security associations. In Australia, we have the top tier security association, ASIAL, and it costs a lot of money to be a member of that association, and that's for the really large security companies, and they get a lot out of it. They protect their little patch by having that association. Now, if they have to show a risk identification process for a new contract that they're bidding for, they can consult the security firm consulting on that. For the Commonwealth Bank, for example, might get one of ASIAL's processes or one of ASIAL's recommended consultants to help them with it. There's nothing wrong with that. Use industry associations, that's what they exist for. You can conduct your own research using industry publications, newspapers, insurance tables, websites, blogs. It's endless. But it's got to be kept in context, okay? You want your research to be relevant to what you're doing. Although it's not always possible to have all the information you need, you have to do the best with the time and money available. You, as an individual, identify risks in your daily activities. When you pull up at a red light, you wait for it to turn green You still check left and right before you proceed through, but you just identified a risk. A person could be running that red light and you were cautious about it. Probably the one that you'll find that's most common is your significant other's gone to visit mum and you've just finished work in the city and you always wanted to catch that movie that you walk past and it's 6 o'clock at night, so you got nothing else to do. You go and watch the movie. You get out of the movie because it had a break, whatever, around about 9, and you've got to go to the car park. And it's the 3rd story underground car park and you're down on level 1, right down the bottom. And there's no other cars around and it's pretty dark. When you go down into that car park, before you get into the lift, you identify any risks and you look at any creepy looking people or scary looking people or shadows where people could hide. You're identifying risks to your personal safety and harm. So you can do it for yourself. You've got this far in life by doing that very well and reading that very well. You can apply that to a business as well. So every business with those risks will have what's called an area of impact. Now, the area of impact, oops, I'll get my screen correct. The area impacted by those risks may include asset and resource base of the organisation, including personnel. Assets could be stock, could be office furniture, could be IT and computers and servers. Revenue and entitlements. So, for example, if it's a retail shop, the revenue goes in the cash register. Entitlements might include the use of the building they're in because they pay rent. The cost of activities, both direct and indirect. People, community, performance, the timing and schedule of activities, the environment. Intangibles such as reputation, goodwill and quality of life, and organisational behaviour. So a source of risk might be internal theft. You've identified that. Now the area of impact will be on revenue and entitlements. It could be on organisational behaviour, because if other people are aware of it and nothing is done about it, they might become involved in it themselves. So when you're identifying the risks, there are numerous charts, checklists, that sort of thing that are available, and there are standards. There's an Australian standard for security risk management, and you can source that off the internet and buy it, and that will help you in your risk identification process. So we've looked at penetration tests, walkthroughs, checking, observations, all that sort of thing to help us identify risks. Research, comparison with overseas experience. There is nothing wrong with that. In some businesses, they have a greenfields approach to risk management. What that means is every 2 years, they write a completely new risk management plan and identify new risks, because risks change. An example of a changing risk could be terrorism, where hijacking of an aeroplane is very difficult today. So they might have to change their methods of getting attention to stabbing people in the middle of London with knives, or trying to poison a lot of people with some kind of gas or something like that. So risks are constantly changing. We are monitoring our identification of risk process and our security risk management plan constantly. Just like when you go to the movies tonight and you go to your car in the car park, you check your risks tonight in the car park. Now, next week when you go to the shopping centre and you push your trolley out of the shopping centre at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you still check for risks, because shopping trolleys get jammed in things and you can spill your groceries all over the place. It's ongoing. It's not complicated. It's something that we all do, and it's something that we can apply in our everyday business management. When you're identifying risks, it does not have to be, in every case, the Ben-Hur style 4,000 people injury when only 10 people a day visit that church, for example, because that's going to be highly unlikely. You've got to make it as relevant as you possibly can. List those risks, and then we come back for part 3 of our series. We'll look at how we are going to implement our countermeasures for those risks. I'm Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy. If you enjoyed that presentation, Google Spy Curious, see what comes up. I'll see you in part 3. Thanks.